Before we really dive into some of those technical and creative aspects of being both an artist and a business person within the industry, I'm curious just to hear a little bit from you about your journey, where you started, how you got to being a DP for hire, and what that career journey has looked like for you.
Yeah, well, I won't say that I came out of the womb holding a camera, um, but definitely did develop a love for cameras at a pretty young age. And when I was a teenager, I used to make Lego films with my brother, a little tie-in to one of your channel videos. Um, but yeah, I made Lego films with my brother, and so that was kind of where I got interested in just cameras more seriously and like learning how they work, learning about the aperture and the all those things, and from there it was just kind of a natural progression to like, okay, well, what can we make if we get a better camera for this, and you know um, and then it just grew into actually shooting real video with those cameras, and it just became like uh, I just developed a huge love for creating images, especially video. Um,
Was
and then
photography a part of that early kind of love, or was it mostly all video film?
It was w- not as early, but my mom she had an old Minolta film camera, stills camera, and she gave me that when I was late high school, just about to go into college, and I was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I took some classes, photography class at a local community college, and I used that film camera and still have it. And so that kind of goes way back too. And the studying film photography specifically, I think was like just kind of a game changer for how I understood light and exposure and all those things. So that was huge.
Yeah.
So from there, I just it kind of naturally led to like, well, I mean, I guess a college degree in this field just makes sense. So I went to college for it, and that's where we met.
That's where we met.
And
Yeah. And we've been making films together now for 15, 16 years.
yeah, that started right away.
Yeah.
So I was lucky enough at the time that I went into college that I owned a camera, and so I kind of the funny thing about being at college, especially where we were, even though it was a film school, it was a formal film school training.
Yeah.
I They still didn't really there wasn't a lot of focus on like, okay, well, these are the different areas that you can go into. It was very focused on, you're all going to be directors, you're all going to make your films,
Yeah.
self-produced, kind of like independent filmmaking. So
And
the
also
the
and
idea
also
of
being able to step into almost anywhere on set and
exactly.
help out, whether that's lighting, audio,
Hmm.
camera, directing. Yeah.
But I feel like that was all as a way to encourage you to just learn all the aspects of
Yeah.
filmmaking so that you can be a better director and
Sure.
producer. That at least that it felt like that was kind of the push. Even just as a senior, your final big thing that you have to do is make a film from
Yeah.
start
Yeah.
to
No,
finish.
no
So
collaboration across the class.
no,
Everybody was responsible for their own
yeah.
film. Yeah.
So there wasn't a lot of emphasis on like, here are the different roles, and here's how you can kind of focus on those areas.
Yeah.
Especially even just DP, and I didn't know what a DP was. And I was being a DP in college with my friends, with you, other
Yeah.
people that were like, hey, I've got this short film, and you got a camera. Do you want to shoot it for me? And that, I mean, I was doing it all the way back then. I didn't even know that's what I was doing. But I was like, I love this. I will just
Yeah.
put a camera in my hands, and I'm happy.
I do love the
Um,
simplicity of those days where it was, who's got a camera? Okay, they're
yeah,
gonna shoot it.
we were the owner operators.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but yeah, so that once I graduated from college, made a lot. Had a lot of good experience, especially with friends on set in college.
Yeah.
The actual education was interesting. Debatable whether I got a whole lot out of that, but the experience of working with my friends and like making films was huge.
Yeah.
And then I got a job not too long after college. I got a job at a production company in Indianapolis, and I worked there for 7 or 8 years.
Mm.
And I freelanced with them at first, just a couple times to they kind of wanted to see how things would go, and then they ended up hiring me, and
Yeah.
I grew into the role of DP there, and kind of was responsible for the look of all of their stuff, and
Where did you
that's
start? Did you come in as a camera operator, as a shooter editor?
yeah, as a shooter editor, really, it
Mm.
was kind of everybody did a little bit of everything. And so I started out shooting, editing, and the trajectory at the time was like, okay, well, you start here, and then eventually you start to take on projects yourself that you manage.
Mm.
And then the more you do that, then you move up to like senior video producer, whatever
Yeah.
the title was at the time. But then somewhere in there, it became very obvious that I am not good at editing and I don't like editing. I'm very slow at it. So they were like, maybe you should just shoot. And you seem to like that better anyway. So I was like, yes, thank you.
Addition by
So
subtraction.
exactly. Yeah. So I focused more and more on just shooting. And when I wasn't on a shoot, I was researching, I was
Mm.
taking classes. I was just really trying to hone cinematography. Um, and for the longest time, I've wanted to be a DP. But there was definitely a weird time in there where they did eventually change my title to DP, director of photography.
Yeah.
But I was like, that's not real. That's my job title, but I'm not a DP. There's
Mm.
no way. Which had a lot to do with seeing what other DPs do, especially Instagram became a big thing for networking and
Yeah.
connecting with other creatives during that time that I was learning and stuff. So seeing what people were doing, the type of images that people were getting on same kind of cameras I was using, but like they're just a lot more advanced, a lot more knowledgeable, and I was just like, there, I'm not a DP. That's
Mm.
fake. Um, but and I kind of still feel that way. But
So
at some
what?
point, I was like, you know what? I'm doing the job, so yeah, I'm a DP. That's fine. I'll just put that
Yeah.
on my website.
There you go. And we're gonna talk more about that later. But I'm curious, like, what was it that made you make the leap to being freelance? Because you had a stable job with a production company where you could do the thing you wanted to do, or at least that you said at the time that you wanted to do. You had the title. What was it that pulled you towards striking out on your own?
So there was a moment when I realized that the type of work that I was doing at my job, even though a lot of it was very meaningful, a lot of it was really good and really cool, and I had a great team. Um, I loved everybody I worked with. That was all great, but the work that I was creating, I got to a point where I realized I was not growing anymore
Mm.
creatively. When I looked back on my years there, it was like just steady, just constant steady growth until 2019 or so, when I kind of feel like everything leveled out, and
Yeah.
whether it was clients or people that I was working with it was like, just keep doing what you're doing. Like, this is great. We love it. Just keep
Yeah.
doing it. And it was like that. Then that works great for a company. You've got a consistent look and feel across all your
Right.
work. But for me personally, it wasn't really satisfying my just the desire to grow and do more as a DP. Um, so I decided to make the leap and just go freelance and see where that would go.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, it's been a really good experience. I mean, if I look at that kind of growth of my professional growth over the last well, yeah, in my third year now,
Mm-hmm.
um, the growth has definitely been continuing to go up again. So I feel like not necessarily it's the quality of my work has definitely improved, but it's not even just like looking at the visual quality of what I'm making. It's the knowledge that I have behind what I'm making. It's not just that it accidentally looks good, or like that, oh, that was cool that it worked out that way. It's like there's a lot more intentionality behind what I've done. And just because that knowledge of being around other people on set, learning from other professionals, has been huge. So that's yeah, it's been a really really good decision for me.
Can you give a little bit more example around what that means to see growth when it's not necessarily just the final image? Because in a large way, the final image is quote unquote all that matters, right? Like that's what people are paying for a lot of times. Like that's what you put online or in the work. So where have you grown outside of that has been fulfilling to you?
I would say that, I mean, depending on the project, like if you look at what I'm making now versus what I made 5 years ago, I think the quality has improved on my visual style and my all of that, lighting, all that I think has gotten better. Um, but yeah, I think there are things that are less tangible, where it's just a confidence in what I'm doing, that may not have always been there before, or if it was probably maybe I shouldn't have been so confident in what I was doing. um, just learning better ways of doing things,
Yeah,
better practices on set, um, better organization. Which, if you could see the wide shot of my office, you would laugh at that statement. Um, but yeah, I think just and there's a lot that you learn from being around other people, other creatives. And whereas before I was with the same group all the time, and we definitely helped each other grow. But once you expand that sphere of influence that's
yeah.
coming into you, and you're on set with different people every day almost, that I've just learned so much from just being with a more diverse group of people, and diverse backgrounds, diverse like experiences, and that just has all just kind of contributed to my professional growth. So
Yeah, I really resonate with that because I think there are seasons for things, right? When you work with the same people for multiple years, there's a lot of benefit to that in that you get to dig deep, that you get to create shorthands and more efficient ways of working together, and you get to build kind of your team and your system. But then there is that chance that it plateaus. Not really even chance. I mean, it's inevitable at some point that it'll plateau to some degree. Whereas, okay, switch things up, go into a season of working with different people all the time, etc. I'll be curious to talk with you in another couple of years and see, have you come back the other direction at all a little bit and maybe started to find your crew that you work with more than others. To me, I feel like there's ebbs and flows to that sort of thing, but it's good to learn from all of them, no matter what season you're in.
yeah, for sure. And I would imagine that in a couple years, like there definitely will be like I mean, I'm already seeing that group kind of form. And there are just certain people that I'm always gonna to go to for support, and for
Yeah,
when I have any influence on the hiring process. Like there are going to be certain people that I gravitate towards.
for sure.
um yeah.
Yeah. Let's dig in a little bit to more of the technical aspect of being a director of photography, a cinematographer. Um, can you talk a little bit about your style and what influences that? When we think about lighting, lens choices, camera choices, angle choices, like all those pieces of the recipe that make up the final image, how are you making those decisions? What do you gravitate towards? And like, if someone said, well, we're going to hire Joe Frank, what's his style? Like, what would you want that to be described as?
Yeah, that's a tricky question, and it's something that for a long time, I've kind of wondered, do I have a voice? Do I have a particular style in my work? Um, and I
You
think,
do. You that
yeah,
as an outside looking in, you do.
and I think everybody does. I think
Yeah.
that's like, and when you're trying to develop that, and I think it just comes naturally. I think it's just as you make more things and you gravitate towards certain types of looks and shots, and you just naturally develop that. But also to an extent, the story is really the only thing that matters when it comes to that. Like that, the story should dictate the style. So, for me, I try to let that, and I think that's been part of the growth as well, trying to figure out where, it makes sense from a story perspective to make this dark and moody versus light and bright, um, or vice versa, and not just always trying to make things look the way I want my images to look in general, and trying to just adapt with the story and the whatever it is, whether it's documentary, um, uh, short film, commercial, whatever it is, whatever the story is there. There's always something. Just making sure that the cinematography serves the
Yeah.
story.
Well, and
Um,
it's a great point because you go on Instagram and you look at other DPs' work and whatnot, and you're getting these tiny little snippets of a larger piece, and the camera op, the DP, they're one piece of a big puzzle to make whatever production it is.
yeah,
And if you stay just within the realm of like, oh, I'm only going to look at like, still frames from DP's work, then you're going to start to miss the fact that like, oh, there's bigger context to this piece,
yeah,
and maybe something you thought didn't look that good actually works really well in context, or something that looks amazing as a still frame is too showboaty in the
yeah.
context of what the final piece was. So I like that you say that the context matters. That being said, I would imagine there are things that you do gravitate towards, that there are maybe specific types of lenses or specific looks that you gravitate towards. What are some of those that, story aside, you kind of find yourself coming back to?
That's where with everybody, you do eventually, even with telling all kinds of different stories,
Mm-hmm.
even if you are really being faithful to making sure the cinematography serves the story, at some point, like there you do start, like I said, you gravitate towards certain things.
Yeah.
And I think something that I've heard from my peers, is and I think that I try to do as much as I can, is just finding, taking the time to find the frame, find the moment where the light hits a certain way, or um the the person looks up at just the right moment, and or they fold their hands, these little moments where it's like, uh, it might not necessarily be, it wouldn't be in the shot list necessarily. Um, but that's something that I've tried to do with my, especially as I've gotten into more uh, formal film sets, where it's like we do have a shot list, we have a storyboard, we have, um, there's a crew that, the lighting has all been set, and we've got things dialed in. Still allowing myself some time to really play a little bit, and like find moments and things that maybe would not have been as obvious in pre-production. And I think that comes from the background that I have in such a documentary style focus that we did at the company I worked for, where everything was uh, available light, so
Mm,
window lighting or whatever it was that we had, and just trying to find the perfect spot where the person looks good, the light looks good, like everything just kind of comes together in that one moment.
yeah.
And I think that's something that I don't want to lose, as I tend to get further away from the all available light, all natural light, and less produced kind of stuff.
Yeah.
As I get more into working with crews and working with more and more equipment and stuff like that, I definitely don't want to lose that sense of like curiosity and allowing myself to really find those moments that speak to me, because I think that's the kind of stuff that does connect with people. So
Yeah. So coming out of college, you cut your teeth on a lot of documentary style work, whether there was actual docs or commercial work that had a documentary style. What are you finding yourself producing or being a part of and DPing now? What's kind of the soup of projects that are typically on your plate at any one time?
it's been definitely a mix of very wide variety, whether it's sports, sports related content, not necessarily, I don't do any live sports, but interviews and things related to sports. Because Indianapolis is just a big sports city. I mean, there's a lot there. The Big Ten always happens here. I mean, all these major things happen in Indianapolis, and then we had the NBA All Star this year, so stuff like that. So there's a lot of sports content that goes around and people get hired on. And then there are a lot of really big hospital networks, so there's a lot of kind of promotional healthcare videos, um, and then just random one-off either commercials or corporate videos, and every now and then a narrative film of some
Mm-hmm.
kind. I got to work on two last year, two short films that came to town, and I was a second AC, but it was really big crew. I mean, directors out of New York or LA or wherever, and um, that was a really cool experience to kind of be on a little bit more of a legit narrative film set. And then in my spare time, it's music videos. Narrative shorts, stuff like that. Anything I can wrangle my friends into. So
So you talk about working kind of on a larger crew at times, and working as a second AC or second assistant camera, and there's a first assistant camera in a situation like that, and then your director of photography, and maybe even a camera operator separately. Can you talk just a little bit about that structure of like the bigger crews and like what do those jobs entail, and why would you as a DP, other than the check, why would you as a DP go work as a second AC? What are you gleaning from working in those roles as well?
yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the thing about coming from the background that I am coming from with the company I worked for and the types of projects we did, it's a very different world than from the kind of film industry. It's very different working for a startup video production company that is direct to client, things like that, where it's very different to work somewhere like that where everybody's in house, everybody, there's very little freelancing happening. Um, from to transition from that into the world of film sets and crews and all that, and every department is defined with specific job roles and all that. So it's a very different world. So I think one of the parts of I was talking about the growth over the last couple of years is just learning all of those ins and outs of
Mm,
working on a crew. And I was not at the point when I left my old job. I was not ready to take on the role of DP of a project with 200 people on the crew.
yeah,
There's no way I would have been very much fish out of water. So learning the communication, the hierarchy, all those things has been really valuable. So
yeah,
that's why a position like that was appealing to me, because it's like for one thing, I mean, honestly, the top of the list is working with my friends. I got I the person who recommended it for me. I was like, oh yeah, that sounds that's going to be a fun time.
yeah,
So that's kind of the number one thing. And then, uh, the as far as the reason behind taking a job like that, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, any experience I can get with a bigger crew is very helpful for me in the future as a DP, hoping to to be on sets like that as in the role of DP. So
right. Awesome. when it comes down to some of the nitty gritty, and like, you've got a shot that you have to get, and you're trying to choose, like, okay, do I use a 50 or a 35 for this shot, 50 millimeter, 35 millimeter? Like, how do you go about making decisions like that? Is it a matter of just throwing both lenses on and seeing which one you gravitate towards? Are there technical considerations you're taking into account, based on what the story needs in that moment, etc.? Like, when it gets really specific, how are you making some of those decisions?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that is decided ahead of time. Not all of it, but it depends on the project. But uh, if it's decided ahead of time, it's usually on a location scout, and I've got an app on my phone that I can cycle through lenses that I own or that I know I'm going to use, and that's one way that I kind of like I walk around and just look at the frame on my phone without any, it's not shallow depth of field, it's not any of that stuff. I'm just looking at the frame itself, and that's usually kind of where I start, just to kind of it's again just kind of trying to find it, trying to be curious and think about like the different options I have, and then just deciding on the one that makes the most sense in the moment. It's kind of instinctive. It's not necessarily like a super technical thing. It can be. There are times when you want to compress the frame, you want, or you want to be able to see more in the background, even if it's close. So that's, it's like just deciding really what you want to actually see at the end of the day in that shot. And then that also influences the lighting and how much blur you want in the background. Like, do you want to stop down a little bit so you can see more? There's definitely like an instinctive side to it where it's like, okay, well, this just feels like what we need to do in this moment. So
Do you ever have situations where, maybe you've got a client who's giving you a lot of leeway, or it's a creative project? I know I do this sometimes, where I'll make like a unilateral decision at the beginning of a project of like, this whole thing's being shot on a 14 millimeter lens, or this whole thing is going to, be lit with only available light, and basically create these creative boxes to work within, before even approaching the project. Have you ever found yourself trying things like that, doing things like that, or are you more comfortable like saying, no, I want my kit with me, and then we'll make the best decision in the moment for this location, this story, etc.?
no, I definitely I'm a fan of rules or limitations to some extent. It's how I That's how I started. I mean, I started making even before I started at the company I worked for. I had a T2i and a 50 millimeter lens,
Yeah.
and I shot everything on that thing. And
So many people started with that exact combination. Yeah.
exactly, and I loved that limitation, that kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, this is how I am seeing the world through this camera,
Yeah.
and how can I uh, use it in different ways to tell the story, and so that was kind of a very formative thing for me. But that is definitely, I think there's a lot of value to that because it's really easy with how much we have access to in 2024, for uh, you know, relatively cheap compared to the way things used to be. Even 5 or 10 years ago, it's way more accessible now. So with all of those options and uh, all those toys that we kind of have at our fingertips, it can be easy to get lazy and just be like, oh well, I'm just gonna do this because that's what makes sense in my head. Um, but then to kind of like force yourself into a little bit of a box to be like, okay, well, how can I make this work based on what we've decided this project needs? Is I think there's a lot of value to that.
Awesome. Shifting gears a little bit here, I want to also talk about the business side of being a freelance director of photography. Uh, this is the element that I think, when I go on YouTube and I search for, you know, informational videos about being a DP or a cinematographer. There's a lot of stuff out there about how to use your lenses, how to light, how to actually do the work, but not a lot about how to get that work, how to
Yeah.
do your taxes, how to market and network, and have a good reel and like all this type of stuff. Can you just talk a little bit about in these last 2 3 years that you've been freelancing? What has that business journey been like? How have you been getting work and building connections, and keeping yourself busy, in an industry that tends to be pretty, feast or famine? It fluctuates a lot depending on the season and what jobs are available.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing that I'm glad that I did early on was networking with peers. So not just like who people who would hire me, but people who are doing what I eventually wanted to do. Um, and so even before I left the job I was at, I was networking with other DPs in town. And that was something that was super helpful when I did make that decision to go ahead and make the jump. I felt like I already knew enough people that if I was like, hey, I'm freelance now, if you have a job that you're booked and you can't do it and you want to send it my way, like, I'm here. So that was really valuable. And also the connections that I had made before were super helpful in trying to figure out and navigate that jump. um, so there was a guy named Freddie. Um, Shout out to Freddie if he's watching. Um, who was super helpful. We met for coffee at least a couple times, did a Zoom call, and I was just picking his brain on like what kind of corporation did you go with, things like that. And then how do you what's the best way to get work and all these things. And he was super helpful. I mean, he was like, this is what you should charge, based on kind of the market here in Indianapolis. And so he was super helpful. And then there were a couple other people throughout uh, my time, especially when I started out, that were just really super helpful with like, this is how you navigate this situation or that one. I mean, and most of those people were, like I said, were peers. I did meet production managers and people like that who have hired me a lot, and I'm very appreciative of those relationships as well. But I think the biggest help was again from other people who are trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So because I mean, it depends on the market you're in, and but that's the best way to find out, like, what is this market like from
Hmm.
somebody who's doing it full time. And they usually like they're going to be honest about like, oh, we got a lot of DPs right now, you should maybe focus on a different area or something like that,
Mm,
or maybe a full-time job as a DP somewhere would be a better route to go. So
yeah.
so I think the people who are out there doing it full time are they're going to be a little more attuned to that. So those, honestly, I think those are some of the most valuable connections you can make, especially starting out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting that you bring up just understanding your market, because geography has a huge part to play in this. Like if you're in LA, it's a different type of beast
Yes.
than if you're in Indianapolis or if you're in Portland, Maine, or
Yeah.
whatnot. In Indianapolis, you've got a lot of sports. It's a huge hub, for transit and for medical. Whereas here in Minneapolis, the work looks different.
Yep.
Weather has an effect on that. I've got a colleague who has helped build a business around creating videos for ski hills, because that's huge here and throughout the Midwest. And then this year, with how bad the winters have been, they're doing less of that type of work and more other type. So you have to be reactive to the geography of where you're at as well. And
Mhm.
just because you go on Instagram and you see, oh, Joe Frank's doing stuff with the NBA All Stars, and you're in, some other place, maybe you can't expect those same types of jobs, but you can certainly get to know your market and look for the jobs that are in it.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, if you are trying to get into cinematography as a full time freelance job, Yeah, it's just going to be, it's your experiences. Unfortunately, it's just going to be very unique to wherever you are. So there's not a lot. That's probably why it's hard to find a lot of information about trying to break into the industry, because it just varies so much based on what, whether you're at a big hub or if you're in a smaller market, or if there's maybe like no market, because there are definitely places like that. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think about where I started freelancing years and years ago in a small mountain town of North Carolina. And there was work to be had, but there was work to be had if I was that full end to end producer, right? I had to sell the job, write the script, shoot and edit the video, and release it because there wasn't the support structure to, have someone who could just DP or whatnot. So you can certainly continue to make content and make videos that pay, but if you're in a smaller market, you may have to be a little bit more of a jack of all trades in order to support that. One of the things I'm curious about, because you came to freelancing from having already a job in the industry as a professional filmmaker for a production company, and you had a network of at least some size when you started. But I'm curious, like, how long did it take you from, okay, last day at the office, first day at the home office freelancing, how long did it take you to really start getting consistent work and to feel like, okay, the machine is working, my marketing, my outreach, my network is working, I'm supporting myself, what was that period of time like?
Well, I think most people you talk to who are doing this full time probably have a very similar answer to what I'm about to say. Is I got lucky. I got so the first couple months were rough. I mean, they were very slow. I had a couple jobs that mostly were from friends who were in positions where they could hire somebody to shoot some video. So I got a couple jobs that way, which was very helpful, and I'm very thankful for that. Um, but I ended up kind of stumbling into a long-term gig that was it was a very flexible situation where they're like, hey, we want somebody 5 days a week as a cam op on this event that's happening in Indianapolis, and it's going from March to August,
Wow.
and you can basically have as many days as you want. And I was like, cool, sign me up.
Yeah.
And then they were also like, if you want to freelance and do other stuff, like, totally fine.
Mm.
So that was a very helpful thing that I just happened to get into. So
and
that
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 and
was
they,
very
and that was
helpful.
sports adjacent, so very specific to your
Yeah,
geography as well.
yeah, it was. So and that's not something I can give advice on. It's just something. But I mean, the thing that I was doing that led to that was networking with peers, because it was somebody who they had reached out to a ton of cam ops in the area, and I just happened to be getting coffee with one of those guys, and he was like, "Hey, do you want this thing? I don't want it." And so I was like, "Yeah, cool." So
Yeah.
so that's, I mean, I think that's the key, is just getting out there and meeting with people, and during the slow times it's easy to be like, oh well, I'll just kind of work on some random stuff, or like, try to whatever, catch up on things. But it can be hard to motivate yourself to like really like reach out to people and reconnect, and even people you've met with before, just to be like, hey, let's meet up again and talk about like what we could work on.
There's a
um
vulnerability to that. There's
yeah,
I'm coming to you and we both know I'm looking for work,
yeah, yeah,
sort of thing. And you don't want to feel like you're hat in hand, but at the same time, this is your professional network. These are the people
yeah,
and I would venture to guess that someone gave them their opportunity, back in the day
yeah,
as well. And everything you're saying and talking about being lucky, it reminds me of the quote, the luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. And I think this is a perfect example of, you were doing work, you were staying busy, you were networking, and then an opportunity came along.
yeah,
And you were able to be patient enough to wait for that opportunity and then strike.
yeah,
So not that some people don't just catch lucky breaks, but I think more often than not, people who don't get their lucky break, sorry to say, it's probably because they weren't preparing for it, at least not as hard as
yeah.
they should have been.
I think another piece of advice that I would have for somebody starting out is if you're not working, if you're not getting hired, and you are meeting with people as much as you can, and really trying to just like keep up those relationships, um, just make stuff. I mean that like it doesn't have to be anything. It doesn't even have to have a story. Just grab a friend, buy them coffee or whatever, buy them a six pack or whatever it is, and take them out and into the woods and shoot some footage of that person. Like set up a little scene, maybe like a dialogue scene or whatever. Just like shoot some stuff, make some things that look really nice. Keep that going online, whether that's on your social media or your website or whatever it is. Just to be putting out work, um, and people will see it. People see it and they're like, I want that for my project.
Yeah.
So that I think that's been huge. There have been projects that I jumped on that were free, that were unpaid. They were just passion projects with friends that
Yeah.
at the last minute they were like, "Hey, we really need like some extra hands," and I was not busy, so I jumped on those. And there was one in particular that, or well, it's happened multiple times, but went and did that, and then next day was hit up by somebody who saw me on set and was like, "Hey, let's do this
Yeah.
paid thing." So that getting out there and making stuff is huge. Even if you're not getting paid for it, it's worth it because all of that goes towards its experience, it's putting out work, it's all those things that you really need to be doing consistently to be able to stay stay busy. So
Yeah. One thing I'll add to that is when you are doing those for free projects or those spec projects or, just staying busy projects is, you know, it's not that you can't go shoot a scene of dialogue and that someone might see that and hire you for sports coverage. But more often than not, people are going to hire you for things that are like what they've seen you do. And so when you're doing those free things, like be thinking about, well, I want to do something that is indicative of the work I want to get hired for. And so if you want to get hired for a lot of like, narrative work, short films, feature films, go do a lot of spec work along that. If you want to get hired in more corporate interview head, talking head type stuff, set those sorts of things up and do them. Because what you put out there, kind of law of attraction esque, what you put out there is what you will receive more often than not. And also, like, I think that when we talk about doing free work, one thing that I'm always really cognizant of is when you're doing free work, like be humble and be grateful for the opportunities, but also do it on your terms as much as possible. Like don't take a job that's free, well, just because I got to work when it's a real crap thing and it's not going to, you're not going to meet anybody there that's going to be helpful. You're not going to do something that you're proud of for your real. You never know when lightning will strike, but whatever you're doing, you should be able to be proud of it. Um, and so I think the one thing that you have in terms of leverage when you're doing free work is the fact that you're giving your time freely. And so I think that provides a little bit of an opportunity to say, hey, if I'm going to do this for free, I'd like to use this lens or I'd like to use this camera and have that opportunity to grow and stretch in directions that you want to go, while also helping somebody out.
yeah, for sure. And I think another thing just in general is just, there's the work relationships that are important to have. But also relationships with other creative people
Mm,
are also really helpful. There's a friend of mine named Michael that he's a music producer and a teacher. He teaches electronic music production, and we've collaborated for the last like 5 years or more, and and a lot of the stuff that we've done together is that kind of thing where it's like, hey, let's make this thing together, and I'm coming to it like, what do I want to like try, like what do I want to
yeah,
learn, and there is it's the type of relationship where he's like, you know what, that's your side of it, so you do what you want there and I'll do what I want here and we'll make something cool.
awesome.
So those kind of relationships are also really important, even with people outside of the actual like film industry. So yeah.
So now that you are, in your third year of freelancing, you know, at the beginning there was some luck. There were, some initial networking that kind of got you some jobs. Today, how are you finding your work? Is the phone just ringing off the hook, or are you still having to hustle? Are you still like trying to break into new markets and things like that? Like, what's it look like today?
It is definitely a mix of things. The phone is definitely not ringing off the hook, but I still get a lot of texts and calls and emails out of the blue that I've, no, I have no idea where they found me. I do try to ask when it feels natural to ask. I usually do ask like, hey, how'd you come across my website or whatever it is, and it's always very random. But a lot of the work that I get is referral from other people who are booked on projects and they don't have the time. So that's a lot of it. Then it's kind of a mix between that and then just people calling out of the blue. So the website uh, is, I think, has been weirdly helpful. I mean,
Mm,
I don't even have much on there. I just have my contact form and my email address on there, and my reel was the only thing on there right now. I'm working on getting actual like projects on there,
yeah,
but I've still gotten a lot of calls from that. So and then some other resource there are other resources out there to staff me up, um, things like that. I think there are a couple others that are Production Hub, uh, that you can find job postings and apply to them. And I've had varying levels of success with that. Sometimes it's great. Like you end up forming a relationship with that person who later on down the road they're like, oh, you're my guy in Indy because like and then other times you just never hear anything. So it's very hit or miss, but it's still worth trying because for those jobs that you get every now and then through those ways, then it's helpful. I guess to answer your original question, whether or not it's like I still have to hustle, I think there is still definitely some of that I have to do. And when I do look at my calendar and I've got some space coming up, it's usually like, all right, who should I kind of like reconnect with and
yeah.
just kind of make sure people know I'm
Who
still
get who
out
gets a
here
free
like ready
coffee
to
this
go.
month?
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
So, and it's that's a weird it's a weird part of this job is the fact that you really do have to kind of put yourself on people's minds.
yeah,
And it's not so much like you're coming to them, like you said, like it's not so much like, hey, hire me. It's like I think it's kind of more of a collaborative, that's how you should approach it, I think, is as like, are there opportunities for us to work together and make
yeah,
cool stuff together? Because that's at the end of the day, most of the people I network with, I mean, everybody just wants to make cool stuff, and
right.
that's, you know, so. And there are different projects that are more suited to different people, and so if you're out there making those connections and building those relationships, when those projects come along that are like, oh man,
Yeah,
that person would be great for this one. As long as you're keeping track of those people and really doing your part to keep those relationships going, then it just kind of naturally happens.
yeah.
So
Well, I think that's super insightful of you to know kind of who your target demographic is, like who's hiring you, who your customers are, right? Because the service based or skills based work that we do as filmmakers, if you're not going directly to client and selling a marketing video, like it is about relationships, and you're not an impulse purchase at the grocery store aisle. You are not going to convince someone, you're not going to twist someone's arm to give you a job. At least I hope not. It won't
yeah,
be a good job. Instead, it is about casting as wide of a net as you can, building as many relationships as you can, and then maintaining those relationships and being very non-pushy about it. Grabbing coffee, grabbing dinner, sending them, a meme of like, oh, hey, this is kind of like what happened on set or something like that. Or, oh, here's some new work I did, thought you might be interested. And by staying top of mind, then as soon as there is that opportunity that you've prepared for, luck strikes and they're calling you to help with that work. So it's a different type of sales game, but it is, and it requires a lot of patience. But I love though that when you first got started, you kind of supercharged your networking by focusing on that and saying I'm going to always be working even if it's for free, and I'm going to try to meet with as many people as I possibly can to cast that net as wide as possible early on.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a list in my phone of people that I was like, I think these are good people to meet, that I hadn't met yet, or that I maybe had met with in the past, and I thought it would be a good idea to reconnect with. I mean, that's there are a lot of, depending on your market, like there could be a lot of people out there that are doing the thing that you are trying to do, or that are hiring for the position that you want. So keeping track of them can be hard, because I mean, people get busy and it's hard. So so yeah, that was helpful for me early on, just kind of like, all right, who's the who's who of cinematography in Indianapolis?
Yeah. I want to ask you a real practical question here. When you are looking at a light calendar and you're like, okay, I need to reconnect with, 5, 10, different people to see if there might be some work. What do those reach outs look like? Are you literally just shooting them a text and saying, oh, hey, it's been a while since we had coffee. Do you want to get together sometime? Are you messaging them and saying, hey, I've got availability do you have any jobs? Are you sharing a recent project with them? Like, what does that look like when you do that reach out?
I think it's a little bit of at least the first and last. It's a little bit of the hey, it's been a while, and whether it's been a while since we worked together or had coffee or whatever it is. It's been a while since we chatted, and so that kind of thing. Or also sending out work is another thing that can be helpful, and I think it just varies based on the relationship that you've had with the person. If you had coffee with them before and it just makes sense to do that again, that's kind of where I lean. Or if it's almost been strictly an email back and forth the whole time, then it's like, okay, well, let me send another email with some links to recent projects or something like that, and just be like, hey, just wanted to share some work with you. Hope you're doing well, that kind of thing. So, and again, it's just not being, you don't want to be pushy about it. So, but just be yourself,
Yeah.
and yeah, don't try too hard.
Try real hard, but don't try too
Yeah,
hard.
yeah, yeah.
So in the midst of all of this documentary work and commercial work and sports work and etc., you've been doing some narrative work as well, and you have a film that is currently playing in film festivals across the world because Stockholm picked it up. It's called Dead End Dreams, and I'm curious just if you would tell us a little bit about the film and specifically like how you got the gig and what you learned from it, doing what, correct me if I'm wrong, one of your largest narrative DP projects to date.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Yeah, so that one came about. A friend of mine, Victoria, is a producer. I had worked with her a little bit in the past, and mostly had just networked. And she lives in Fort Wayne, so just a couple hours away. But she also travels down to Indianapolis and works sometimes. But I had mostly talked to her over Zoom and met her in person at a couple like screenings from local filmmakers and stuff like that, and had not really done a whole lot with her yet. But she reached out and was like, "Hey, a friend of mine is directing this short film, and he needs a DP, and it seems like the kind of thing that you might be interested in." So she hooked me up with him, and we talked, and I read the script, and it was fun. I thought it was a cool story, pretty simple, as far as from a production standpoint. It was pretty simple, and yeah, it seemed like it'd be a good opportunity. So yeah, then it turned into it started out as a 3-day shoot, and it kind of ballooned into a 5-day shoot. It was originally going to be like a 15-20 minute film, and it is now sitting at like 40 minutes.
Wow.
So it's like a short feature, and so maybe a little over 40 minutes. So it's in the feature category, but
Mm.
so originally I was like, oh, I shot this short film, and now I have to retrain myself to feature. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's kind of how it came about. It was just a mutual a connection based, through somebody I knew. So.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about like just what the film's about and how the story influenced your creative decisions as you went to shoot this?
So the story is there's an actor and his buddy from a long time ago. They used to be friends, clearly had a falling out at some point. And this actor, kind of struggling actor, he has not gotten a lot of work, but he has a big opportunity that pops up, and he's like, "Hey man, we used to shoot all kinds of stuff together back in the day. Can you just like film some stuff for me? Because I don't have he doesn't have a reel. He has like nothing to show." And so he's like, can we get together for a few days and just shoot some stuff? And his friend begrudgingly accepts the job because he needs money. Even though he's still mad at him, there's still a lot of tension between the two. And so then the whole film is kind of them trying to navigate this new like working together, and then like and all of the things that are under the surface. And so it's definitely a dramedy. It's got some funny moments, but it gets pretty heavy. Um, so, and as far as that and the approach that I took with the cinematography, I think it was very much based on the locations we had. Like, it was very informed by what we had to work with. So we had the one of the character where there were two different apartments, and one of the apartments in particular was going to be um, the backdrop of like a big part of the film.
Mm.
So, um, and it was day, night, morning, afternoon, like every time of the day, just about.
Yeah.
And I think we got like, I don't know, at least 3 or 4 different looks out of that one room. Um, so that had a lot to do with kind of my approach to the cinematography. Um, and then also just this kind of underlying like tension between the two characters, and there was a lot of uncertainty at the filmmaker at in his home. He had just recently lost his mom, and
Mm.
like his younger sister is like, I want to leave, I don't want to be here anymore. And so like there's just a lot going on in his personal life that is pretty heavy. And so a lot of the scenes with that character in his apartment tend to they get pretty dramatic. So I kind of let the lighting and the cinematography kind of flow with that. So,
Mm.
and then there are other comedic moments with the other character. He's a very very goofy and funny character, and we kind of approach those in a very different way. So just depended on the scene and also the location, what that had to offer. And we had on this film in particular, this was the first time I really worked with an art department too, and
Mm.
that was a very very helpful. I mean, it the cinematography would not be what it is without the art department. I mean, it
Yeah.
just would not be. So that was huge, and I think that was like a kind of a eye-opening experience for me, because I mean, I knew that that was important, but this was like, okay, well, this now I see
Yeah.
how important it is.
Yeah. When
So
like color theory in costuming and set design is
yeah,
starting to come into play and you're like, "Oh, cool. Now my image looks great."
exactly. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, oh, my job's easy now.
What is I'm curious just what are like your takeaways from that experience, both from a positive and not negative, but like what's something that you wish maybe had gone differently or you had done differently that you'll learn from, and what's something that went really well that was super positive that you'll take forward with you?
Yeah, as far as the learning moments from this film, I think some of the stuff has a lot to do with lighting, and having a lot of flexibility with the light. I had a gaffer who he had owned all his own equipment, and he had a lot of good stuff a lot of toys to play with.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that I learned was kind of trying to balance, you know, how far do we go with these things? You know, we've got full RGB on like every single light we're using. So like, I think there are probably moments when I probably could have dialed it back a little bit on the, you know, things being a little too much color contrast here and there
Sure.
maybe. But things like that. But I don't think any of it's like, oh, like super obvious. It's
Right.
probably more stuff that I would notice, or well, lots of other professionals would notice. But hopefully for general audiences, not necessarily a standout thing. But that was one of the learning things, is just kind of trying to figure out the balance between all the different options for light that we have now, and trying to dial that into like what really matters, and making the image look the way that it should for the story. So and then positive experiences, uh I mean, it was a huge, just like overall, just a very helpful and kind of enriching experience to shoot this film. I mean, I feel like I had the opportunity to just make what was in my head a reality, and in a way that it's been hard to do on a lot of things in the past, and in this particular film, it I felt like all of that was just, it was just very easy to make things look the way I wanted, and that had so much to do with the crew that I was with, Victoria, as AD, just being very communicative on time, things like that, that all of those things that contribute to stress, where it's like, I don't know how much time we have left,
Yeah.
so I don't know if I have time to do, but then Victoria being like, we got 5 minutes, go ahead and change the shot, do what you want to do.
Or we're
So
behind 5 minutes and you
or
got to call
or we
it. You
don't.
got to move.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's helpful too. That's just as helpful.
Yeah.
Because then you're like, okay, well, I know what I need to do to make this work, and we're gonna go with it.
Yeah.
So that was, I mean, just having the support of a crew was huge. I mean, that was very helpful. And it just, yeah, I mean, like I said, it was a great experience. So
Awesome. So, as we kind of wrap up our conversation here, I'm curious to get your take on kind of a classic question, but then I'm going to flip it on you here in a minute. For someone who is interested in doing what you do, they love cinematography and they want to become a cinematographer, they want to become a director of photography. Maybe they're about to go to college, fresh out of college, maybe even looking to make a career change, whatever it is, they're starting this journey. What advice would you give them?
I think no matter where you're at in your journey of learning and growing and stuff, I think just do it. Just just make stuff. I mean, like I said, it doesn't have to be anything earth shattering. If you've got a friend who has a script, just make it happen. Like get or if you have a script that you want to make, just make it. You can sit on it for as long as you want, and tweak it until it's you feel like it's ready. But at some point, you just just do it. Just make the film. Shoot whatever you have. Like if you don't have, if they're all your friends have busy schedules, and they don't have time to go hang out with you in a field while you shoot sunset shots of them, then just shoot sunset shots. I mean, do just go out there, learn the camera, learn what lenses make the image look the way you want, learn the way things all learn the way light works and all that stuff. Like just get out there and do it, and then fail, make stuff that, you get back and you're like, man, this looks really bad. But, do it. Just like learn from those mistakes, and yeah. I think that's honestly, like, that was something that somebody told me early on. And that was the one piece of advice that I think that helped me the most when I started, was just get out there and shoot. He said, if you like this camera, if you think this is cool, like, just go shoot stuff.
Yeah.
And I did that, and that was, yeah, that was the best piece of advice I got starting out. So
And then for you, with where you're at now in your career, as you look forward, if one of your, professional heroes or just someone that you look up to professionally was sitting here today, what type of questions would you ask them? Like where do you want to grow to, and what are you looking forward towards as you continue to progress through your career?
That's a good question. And I think, if I had the opportunity to talk to one of my heroes of cinematography, I think I would probably have less to ask about anything technical or anything like that, and it would just be more of like, what do you what do you wish that you had known
Mm,
earlier? What are some things that you learned over time that, you know, you can't learn in film school, you can't learn on YouTube? And and I think that would be, I mean, it feels like a cop out, but I feel
no,
like that
it's
would be the question I'd want to ask the most, is just like, what's like one thing that you feel like if you hadn't learned this, you wouldn't be the person you are right now.
yeah. I think it's insightful from the standpoint of our heads tend to go towards the technical, and the technical is a huge part of it. If you don't know your tools, you can't put your tools to use. But I'm reminded of a quote by Tarantino when asked a similar question. And he said that he could learn a lot from Martin Scorsese, but not talking about filmmaking. He just wanted to have dinner with him and
Yeah.
just let his worldview and his presence kind of like make him a better filmmaker. And I think that's very insightful. And I think it's similar to what you're saying. And it's that missing piece a lot of times, mentorship, learning about, just how to think creatively, how to be an artist in this field. What is the thing that you wish you had known sooner versus, oh, what camera should I get? What lens should I use? Where should I put my key light? Those things come through experimentation. Wisdom a lot of times comes through tough experiences, and hopefully our
Yeah.
mentors can help us, sidestep some of those experiences, and we can gain from their wisdom.